What's up, listeners? It's Andrea. Today, we found a Keiko fan to come geek out with us. Crying babies have no place in public spaces. And we asked the question, how would you have resolved the whole space prisoner problem? All that and more coming up.
Welcome to the TNG Podcast, the #1 place in the Alpha Quadrant to geek out about all things Star Trek: The Next Generation. I'm your co-host, Shereese.
Hey, I'm your co-host, Andrea. Shereese, today we are talking a really awesome episode, Season 5, Episode 15, Power Play. This episode was written by Paul Rubin and Maurice Hurley and directed by David Livingston. The Enterprise picks up a distress signal and upon investigation, find that it seems to be coming from the USS Essex, a spaceship lost 200 years earlier. Ghost ship! Ghost ship! Yes.
Ghost ships are always a good time on the show. So I'm excited to dig through this one. Now, before Andrea gives us the plot summary, which actually that was the plot summary, before she gives us her initial thoughts, we have a very special guest that I want to introduce. So her name is Candace Bernardi, and she is the host of the Gratitude Geek Podcast, a relationship marketing podcast that helps micropreneurs find their micro-influencer magic. She also happens to be a TNG superfan, just like us, which is why she's here. Now, Andrea and I were honored to be guests on her show, episode number 130. So be sure to check out the Gratitude Geek Podcast, wherever podcasts are found. And now we're honored again to have her as our guest. So Candace, welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so excited to get geeky with you.
Yay! So before we get started, we love to ask all of our special guests the same question. And the question is this: who is your favorite TNG character and why?
Okay, so this question is complicated, or the answer is complicated because I'm now 52 years old. And when I started watching TNG, I was, 16 or 17. So my answer's changed. And I'm going to answer it from today, rather than what I would have said when I was 17 and I first started watching the show. And the answer
was it Wesley? Was it Wesley when you were 17?
No, it wasn't Wesley. It was Geordi LaForge when I was a teenager.
Oh, I love Geordi.
Because he was so analytical and scientific, and he always had the answer, and he was very, very thoughtful. And I don't know, I just still have a crush on LeVar Burton. So I don't know.
Well, he's kind of the best thing ever. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like the perfect human. But
he really is.
Today, now that I am all grown up and I can look back at the episodes and I have the perspective of DS9, because I can't separate the two shows because the characters are cross board. But now my favorite character is Keiko O'Brien.
Oh my God. Why? Because we have not had like a ton of Keiko love, other than like her hair is amazing and her wardrobe is amazing. But like, I'm so curious to know why she's your favorite.
Well, honest answer is when I look back at my childhood, I didn't see anybody on TV that looked like me. I'm an Asian American. My mother was an immigrant from Korea who came here when she was 10 years old. And there was nobody in 1987 who looked like me on TV, with the exception of Connie Chung. So looking back, from that perspective of that's why. But my love of Keiko came from DS9 because on DS9, she really does kick ass.
She really does.
She starts a school. She goes and lives on Bajor without her husband. She goes through an entire pregnancy where she isn't even carrying her own child. Wow. And she deals with all that stuff. Yeah. So, I'm sorry. She didn't carry her child because the fetus had been transferred to another person. but all the things that could have broken her, because that could have broken her. But the way we wrote her, the way she was written, she was strong, she was independent, she was trusting and loving, and just, and in today's episode, there's a little bit more about why I love her. So
awesome.
Yeah.
We have been looking for someone who actually likes Keiko. Like, that was a request we put out into our community. Like, somebody tell us. And I love that answer. I will say that both Keiko and Miles in TNG, I mean, Miles shows up a lot, but just randomly, and we don't know why. They don't have a lot of functionality in TNG, but you get to Deep Space Nine and they are integral. They are so important. They go from being these random side characters. They go from being these random side characters who are on the bridge, on the ship with the other 1,000 people doing whatever they do, to being like the bridge crew. Now, Deep Space Nine is a space station, so it's not the same kind of configuration, but they go to being like main characters. And they are so much more fully developed and fleshed out, so much more interesting, so much more impactful. Their relationship has a lot more facets to it. So that makes a lot of sense.
Well, Miles also is really important in this episode.
He's super important in this episode, but most episodes he's just like there. And we're
he's interchangeable with here? Anybody else. Yeah, he's so interchangeable with anybody else. I'm like, anybody could have pushed that button, like whatever. But yeah, Miles, I never really got into DS9. I've tried watching it a few times. I'm like, okay, it's cool. It's just a very, very different type of storytelling. It's like long form storytelling. It's more, it goes more in depth because instead of
more serious tone, that's for sure.
Yes. And instead of like the Enterprise going to different worlds and just having these little pit stops, now everybody comes to them. So they're like the home base. It's just a very different vibe. I don't dislike it. I just never fell in love with it the way I did with TNG. But I'm glad to know that like Keiko continues to go on and kick ass. And to be honest, I would have left Miles' ass at home and gone to Bajor too, because I can't stand Miles. But I'm like, how do you are too fabulous for Miles, girl. Level up.
I'm curious how you feel about Voyager then, because it was episodic, not serial.
Yeah, I think Andrea's favorite is TNG, and that's from the childhood nostalgia.
Yeah,
that's like the
my home base. Yeah,
for me, it's definitely Voyager is my favorite, just because of I was a feminist since birth, and I was like, female captain, yes, and that was during like my teen years when I was developing my identity as a woman. So I was like, I want to be like Janeway when I grow up. But my second favorite is TNG for the same reasons that Andrea has. It's that warm and fuzzy. It's what I watch with my family. It's got such a special place in my heart because of my connection to community through it. So hence our show.
Yeah. So Candace, before we jump into the episode, how did you get into TNG?
We watched it together as a family when I was a kid. And I've always been nerdy. I mean, I've always been a geek. I had a computer when I was 10 and I was learning how to program, right?
Yes.
So I've always been geeky, and I was 10 in 1980. So I don't know. I had America Online when nobody else had it. Remember when they started giving CDs to everybody for America Online?
Oh my God, yes.
Okay. I had America Online
Holy
before
shit,
that.
That is a blast from the past, Candace. America
I did not know what AOL stood for until this moment. I was today years old. I was like, America? Oh, that's what the A is. I thought it was just AOL, just letters. We just picked letters to name it. That's amazing.
Turns out those letters all stand for something. WWW stands for something. Yeah. Oh my God. Well, I love that it was just part of your like growing up, in your family. I think that they're just, I was always very sad about how much just like a quote unquote normal part of a childhood it was to like introduce young boys to sci-fi, and parents didn't often like give the same space for like young girls to get into sci-fi. So I'm really psyched to hear that it was just like, everybody just kind of gathered around the TV and we just watched it. It was just normal, which I'm like, yes, you can't have, can't be letting the boys have all the fun.
My dad didn't have any sons, so,
he had no option.
He had to share his geekiness with somebody. Yep.
Same with my dad. Mwahaha.
The thing is, dads who have sons and don't share the same things that they share with their sons with their daughters are missing out. Just
for sure.
Advice out there for any of your dads out there,
and vice versa. Totally. You're missing out. You never know. I saw this TikTok that was hilarious. This person was like, my dad introduced me to something like Avengers, when I was 12 or whatever. And then it's like, look at me now. And dad walks into her room and she's just got like Marvel stuff everywhere, dolls, posters, bedspreads, everything. And she turns to look at him and he's like, what did you do? And she's like, I am what you made me. It was so funny. I was like, that you never know when you're going to spark this passion or love in your child for something as incredible as sci-fi, which is just super special.
Yeah. Well, should we jump into this episode? Candace, as our guest, what were your initial thoughts going into this episode?
So I didn't remember it at all. So I had to watch it to be reminded. However, I'm 52 years old and I saw these episodes for the first time when I was a teenager. So I didn't remember the episode at all. So it obviously hadn't made that big of an impression on me. But as I was watching it, I got this feeling that it was directed by somebody who didn't normally direct episodes. So you said it was directed by David Livingston. So I'm going to Google whether or not how many episodes he's directed, because it just had a different vibe.
That's so interesting that you say that. David Livingston, to my recollection, just off the top of my head, has directed maybe 5 to 8 TNG episodes, like not a huge amount. And we are, pushing halfway into season 5 already. So it's so interesting that you picked that up.
Just a different,
you're right. It does have a different vibe. Yeah. It's not that it does stand out in that way. And I agree with you, Candace. It's not something that's super memorable. Like just hearing the title Power Play, I was like, that didn't invoke
could literally be anything.
Could literally be anything. But I think it's similar to last week's episode. I mean, to 2 weeks ago's episode where Masterpiece Society, the one where Troy falls in love with this xenophobic guy who's in charge of this whole community inside of a biodome, where it's just like kind of this, it's just a really solid episode. It's maybe not the most memorable thing in the world. It's certainly not garbage. That's always a plus. It's just this solid episode that builds the foundation for our love for the show so that it can have those standouts here and there. But this is like that foundation of just like, this is really, really good.
See, I have to disagree with you. Like this episode always stood out in my memory a lot. And I remember a few things about it. I remember Troy and Data and some third person, which of course it ended up being Miles, like the ultimate third wheel of everything TNG. Like being taken over by these little like balls of light and then, taking over the ship and like trying to like create some sort of hostage situation to like leverage like their position. And I do remember that little trick that like Ro and Geordi were trying to pull where they like had the little machine and they all had to be in the circle to like try to extract these little energy beams of light or whatever. I do remember that. Although you're right, like the title itself, Power Play, I keep confusing it with last week's episode where I was like, oh, it's a power play. Okay, this is like the wiping the memory and somebody tries to take over the ship. Like
Power Play is a better name than Conundrum.
Yeah, Conundrum is just like, we have a problem on our hands. Like that's every freaking week. Like,
Power Play is a much better name for that episode.
Yeah.
Maybe this one should be called Conundrum.
So maybe they wrote this episode with this title first, but they released that one first.
I mean, it could be. It could be. Who knows? All right, so let's just jump right in here. The Enterprise is puttering along past the star system and finds this very distinct distress signal coming from one of the moons. And it turns out it's a Starfleet subspace distress signal standard to the Daedalus class starships, which haven't been in service for 170 plus years. So already Conundrum is a better title.
Oh, this is what I'm saying. Like, we should have swapped those titles.
Yeah. It's like, wait, what? Like, this has been out of commission for like 174 years or something. And you were hearing this distress, like that already was like, ooh, ghost ship vibes.
Yeah. And the distress signal's not coming from the planet, which is called Mabu 6. And I'm a fan of this name a lot.
Ooh.
It's coming from the moon. So you're like, huh? It's coming from the moon. And they're like, what is this distress signal? Had something crashed here? Like, what could this possibly be if it's a Starfleet distress signal? And Data goes, dee, 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 and discovers that the USS Essex crashed here like 200 years ago. So you're like, wow. And their distress signal is still working. That's amazing. Like that is some really good technology. I'm thinking about all the technology that I personally own right now and how it will be completely useless and obsolete in 1 year. Like it will no longer
solar.
function.
I mean, what's the deal? What's the deal with the battery? How's the battery
I'm
life
saying,
on that?
yeah, like my batteries are dead within hours on my devices. So this is amazing.
It feels very like black box to me, where it's like no matter what happens to the ship, that black box like continues, like it records and preserves like what's going on, which like always blows my mind when you hear black box audio of like a plane crash and you're like, the whole plane was destroyed, everybody died, and yet this black box maintained it, like it's still there and still houses a recording, which is like, it blows my mind. So that I did think, where I was like, it feels black boxy. By the way, since we were just talking about this, there were multiple working titles for this episode and all of them are crap. Okay. So working titles for this episode included The Invaders, which actually makes a lot more sense. Terror in 10 Forward, which sounds like a Twilight Zone title or something.
That's awful.
It's awful. And then Feeling Poorly. Feeling Poorly. Did somebody allow naming rights for their like kindergartner? Like, what is this?
We're gonna name this episode Sad Face.
Yeah. I was like, Feeling Poorly.
Poop emoji.
Yes, exactly. Although I will say, I think feeling poorly is right up there with terror and 10 forward. Like, okay, all right, Twilight Zone, calm down.
I like Invaders, but
What
it's
was
a little
the
bit
Invaders?
spacey. It's a little Space
The Invaders.
Invaders. It's a little.
It feels a little bit like atomic age sci-fi, like 1950 sci-fi. Which, don't get me wrong, I freaking love. I love atomic age sci-fi. But none of these titles work. So I guess Power Play is like the least offensive of all of these titles.
Well, what would you have called it then?
Conundrum.
Okay. Which was last week's episode.
Okay.
Anyway, so just had to reroute us for a quick second because it was super like right up our alley. So yeah, it turns out that the distress signal, the transponder code to this distress signal is identical to the distress signal of the USS Essex that disappeared over 2 centuries ago in this sector. So it's like even more ghost ship vibes. I'm like, yes, I'm here for all of this.
And did you notice Ensign Rose on the bridge? Whoop whoop.
Yeah, like to see her back.
Rose back.
Did you guys notice that while the crew is sort of hearing this distress signal and they're like, wait, the transponder codes like are identical match for the Essex who disappeared 200 years ago in the same place, and we never heard back about what happened. Did you notice that Troy was like came onto the bridge from the turbo lift by the science station and walked all the way around? And even before she spoke, I was like, ooh, Troy's feeling something. And I did not remember this part at all. But I was like, wow, she's like really processing some sort of like strong feeling she's getting from this moon. And I love that she's like, you know, there's somebody down there. Like somebody is alive down there, which knowing the ending, I'm like, I don't know if maybe that's the language she should have used, but she could have said like, there's a life force or like some presence or something. But she did say like, there's somebody alive down there. Cause they were like, well, should we go down and like check out the Essex remains or the whatever? And I love that they're like, not a good call. Cause there's so much like EM radiation everywhere. Like it's just going to be a hazard for like transporters and shuttles and all of this stuff, you know, but Troy really does argue. She's like, there's somebody down there. And I love that she's got this like strange and powerful feeling from the moon. And I love that like she's back to being a very strong empath again, because she kind of wasn't for a little while.
Yeah.
I like this episode because it gives her an opportunity to actually act, the actress.
Yes.
And there are, you know, she gets, you know, because she's always dressed in tight clothes and her hair is so beautiful. Sometimes she's not taken seriously as a character, but in this episode, she actually does some acting. So it's nice.
And same thing with Brent Spiner, who plays Data. We get to see the acting chops of both Troy and Data in this episode, which is awesome. Miles is just kind of a weirdo. He's just kind of weird in this episode.
There's a lot of hate for my. Yeah, well, yeah, he was kind of a jerk in this episode, wasn't he?
He was a jerk. And he was a jerk and he was weird. Like there were times when he was a jerk and a creep. Keiko. Yeah, he was a jerk and a creep. He was both. He was both.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that Troy and Data were like lovely people. They were awful as well. However, I feel like we got to see a bigger range from them of emotions. And then Miles, it was mostly just confusion and anger. Like we didn't get to see as many different.
He was just turning like, emotions. He just seemed kind of like a drunk, angry asshole. And you're like, dude, what? Like, that's, you know, it's like you can find that kind of guy at a bar on any given Saturday night. Yeah,
that dude's in Tim Ward every Saturday.
We know that they're criminals, but we don't know what they did. So we don't know what the backstory is for those entities.
This is true. Well, actually, to speak to Brent Spiner's like kind of getting to flex his range a little bit, he actually commented about this episode in particular. He said, I always love to play another type of character. The challenge here was to make my character not sound or act like Lore. And I think I did. It's really fun to get into those curves because so much of Data is already defined. And when you get to play someone else and let loose, like Leonard Nimoy occasionally got to do on the old show, like it's really, really rewarding. And I was like, cool. So I had read that quote before I watched the episode. And so I kept kind of like watching his character and I was like, he does seem like Lore, but not quite like Lore. You know, it's like how many times and how many different ways can you play like angry bad guy? But he made a difference. Like it didn't feel just like a template of Lore.
It didn't feel like Lore at all. He crushed it. It felt to me like a totally different person having in his body. It didn't feel like Lore.
Yeah, like Lore is a lot more like self-assured.
He's a little Loki style. Like Lore is like Loki, just very kind of trickster, like kind of slimy, kind of sneaky, but that's not this
with
guy.
some murder.
This
but
guy
like,
was just
yeah,
like ready to fight and just
like
aggressive.
unhinged.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, totally unhinged. Anyway. Oh my gosh.
Has Brent Spiner ever been awarded any acting awards? Because I remember thinking when he was Best Supporting Actor, First Contact in the American Academy of Science and Fiction.
Oh.
So yeah, he's got, but never really any Emmys. And I always thought
That's
that he
too
was
bad because
he was
he's
a
so
better
great.
actor than that. Yeah, I always thought he at least deserved a nomination.
Oh, agreed. All right. So listen, Troy is just feeling this vibe like way too strongly. She's like, I'm sorry, but I am sure that there is somebody alive down there. So they're like, all right, transporters are a no-go. We'll send a shuttle down. And I got to say, this is the first time in a while in Star Trek that I've seen such freaking terrible CGI.
Oh God.
It was so fucking bad. I was like, what? There's just like, it's like Windows 97 clouds with just like a little shuttle bouncing around in it.
Well,
And I was like, what the F is this, you guys?
A gazillion years ago, I saw a documentary about the original Star Trek series where they showed how they made it look like the bridge was shaking. And when I was watching this episode, that scene, I was like, oh, they must be the actors are the ones that are moving. It's or the camera's moving and the actors aren't, because that's what it looked like. I mean, Riker was able to touch all the buttons on the console easily without any effort. And it looked like the camera was moving and not. Yeah.
Yes. I will say, first time on a shuttle we've ever seen some seatbelts. I was like, hey, safety harness, about time.
I know, because they don't have seatbelts on any other part of the ship, and they really should, because they get in a lot of space battles. There's explosions, they crash, and they don't even have chairs for most of the people on the
attacking.
Ship.
Yes,
yeah, like we. Yeah,
I always wondered about that.
Most people. Go ahead, Candace. Sorry.
Well, what do the kids do when the ship's under attack?
We have no idea. Alexander apparently gets trapped in a museum. We don't know what they do.
The lizard in his pocket? Is that episode?
Exactly. Yeah, it's that one. And Andrea suggested like maybe school should be canceled when there's like, when the ship is shaking. And I was just like, they would never have school.
They would never have school.
They've got to have some gravity defying boots or something, which actually that's something I saw on the Expanse that they should absolutely have on the Enterprise.
Like grav boots or like mag boots.
Yeah. Where you like don't fall into, you don't hit the ceiling whenever the ship shakes, but whatever. They have seatbelts in the shuttle.
1997 versus 2020.
Yeah, the
technology has come a long way.
Seatbelts. Here we finally have seatbelts. Yeah, they had seatbelts in the 1980s. They had them.
They became mandatory in like the early 90s, if I recall. 86. Okay, so like, come on, guys. But all right, good to see some safety harnesses. And now, so the electromagnetic field is way too strong for the shuttle. Shit starts going
like the
wrong.
Most
like
terrifying shuttle ride I've ever seen.
100%.
I was like, pass on all of this. Get me out of here.
100%. And they're like,
okay, we're gonna crash land.
Well, and that's why
prepare for impact. Yeah,
I knew it was a different director
because of that. How terrifying that was.
Well, their crash landing was such 90s television where the camera tilts one way and then it tilts another and then it just spins and spins and spins. And I was like, that's not really how crashes go. Okay, you know what? Whatever.
It looked like an amusement park ride.
Yes, it really did.
I wouldn't ride that ride.
It looked like Star Trek Shuttlecraft, the ride. Yeah, like you could get it like Universal or something. Yeah, it was very, And like, okay, so they make it out okay, but Riker's got a busted arm. Like he broke his arm in the crash.
All that happened from that crash. They are lucky.
They should all have died immediately upon impact. Come on.
His broken arm is so fake.
Yeah, he's just sort of kind of holding his arm around like his rib.
I was kind of thinking if you had a broken arm, which thankfully I've never had one, and I hope I never have one. But I was thinking, I was like, doesn't it hurt? Like, I don't know. He just seemed kind of like,
Shereese, he's an officer on the Enterprise. Pain receptors have nothing on his sense of duty and responsibility.
When he sent Data back so the shuttle crashes, and then Riker and Troy emerge, and Data emerges kind of last. And Riker's like, hey, Data, go back and see if there's any electronics we can use because we can't contact the Enterprise from here because the storm is interfering and everything. And Data comes back a few seconds later and is like, there is nothing in the ship that is usable. So I'm like, wait a minute. If the crash was so bad that there is not even a hypo spray, not even a data pad that is functional, how did y'all walk away without even getting the little cute cut over your eyebrow? Nothing.
These things are designed to sustain like huge force
Phaser
and
fire.
impact. But the 3 meat bags that were bouncing around in there, like ended up being okay. I don't
Maybe their
think so.
uniforms have some sort of personal shield that we just don't know about.
Oh my God, you are so kind, Candace. Because I'm like, I just call BS on this. Like they should have all been killed and that would have been the end of the episode.
Or at least been like severely injured. All of them should have been injured. They didn't all need broken arms, but like we could have had cut eyebrows and like busted lip or like
a contusion or two.
Some adorable cuts and scrapes, a bruise or something. I mean, they were just like, well, that sucks. Anyways, let's go explore.
Like I come off of a roller coaster with more damage than they came out of that entire like shuttle collision with the planet. Like, but
that's what the shuttle looked like, was a roller coaster ride. That's
it really did. So Riker's arm is broken, but like they start as they're walking around, Troy is like, I can feel more strongly than ever that there is something alive on this moon. And they had this, like, it was better CGI, a lot better than like the shuttle bouncing around in the clouds, but they look up into the sky and there's a storm front approaching. And on the storm front, there's like shimmering.
It's like glitter. So
yes.
I like that.
It reminds me of like watching the sunset over the ocean, like, because it like the way that the light refracts
shimmers on the water.
Yes. Yeah. It looked a lot like, I felt like they probably shone some light on some water and like captured that and superimposed it. But I was like, whoa, that looks really cool. But there's like hundreds of thousands of these little shimmers kind of coming towards them. And you're like, oh, that doesn't bode well.
I wouldn't think anything of it, honestly. I mean, if I just survived a freaking shuttle crash and I was on a planet, I'd be like, oh, thank God I'm alive. Like that's all I would be thinking. And then if I looked up and saw glitter in the sky, I'd be like, oh, pretty. Like I wouldn't be like, hey, this seems kind of unsafe, like more unsafe than crashing in a shuttlecraft on a stormy planet onto like volcanic rock. I think shimmery clouds would be very cool. I would not think that was dangerous at all.
Yeah, by the way, Riker did say it's non-porous rock. So I'm thinking you'll crash going a million miles an hour into granite and you're fine. Even further reason to call bullshit. Come on. Whatever. I'm mad about that. All right. Anyway.
I love that you know what non-porous rock is.
Hashtag science.
Yeah. I was like, granite. As a climber, that's the first one I always go to. I like to climb at Joshua Tree from time to time, and it's all granite and it's really sharp. So like you even take like a little fall or like your hand slips a little bit and it'll like cut your fingers. So I'm like, so you guys crashed a shuttle onto that and you're fine. Okay. All right. Okay, guys.
So what happens is that they're like, okay, we need to find some way to get back to the Enterprise. Riker's more convinced than ever that there is no life here. Because Troy was like, maybe they live underground, maybe they've made caves. And it's like, yeah, but it's been 200 years. So they've just been interbreeding for 200 years. I don't know. We need to like put our thinking caps on with this. But Troy feels a living presence. So she's like, but someone's alive here. So Riker's like, it's seeming less and less likely. And Troy's like, it's more and more likely. So we're like, okay, back on the ship, they're like,
because
all right,
feelings.
Yeah, exactly. Back on the ship, they're like, okay, we need to find some way to get them, but we can't obviously send another shuttle because it's going to crash again. We can't beam them down, which was the whole reason they took the shuttle in the first place, was because of this storm. And then O'Brien's like, you know what we need is a pattern enhancer. And this is actually where O'Brien comes in handy, being the transporter chief, because he's got some special knowledge that literally everyone else has, but we're going to pretend like only he has it, him, Geordi, and Wesley, who's not here. So O'Brien's like, all right, I'm going to take these pattern enhancers, go down to the planet, and then it'll make the transporters work. And Geordi's like, you have like a 50-50 chance. And O'Brien's like, I'll take those odds. And Picard's like, cool. And I was like, wait a minute.
Yeah.
50-50 chance?
He has a baby.
Who bets on a 50-50 chance? And I like really went on a rant in my notes about this. I was like, what kind of safety is this? Who would ever put odds on it? Like all this stuff. And then I thought about it later on and I thought maybe I'm seeing this all wrong. Maybe the 50-50 chance is there's a 50% chance he will get to the planet. There's a 50% chance he will not be able to leave the ship. Like the transportation won't work. And I was like, that makes more sense, because when he does, it works. He transports to the ship. He's just like, hey guys, brought some transporter enhancers. And I thought like, you just survived with a 50-50 chance. You should be so much more relieved. And you're just acting like nothing. And I thought about it. I was like, oh, that's probably why. Like if it was a 50-50 chance of I'll make it or I'll just stay here, then there really isn't any danger. And it's not really that scary. And it's probably fine.
I think you're being too generous, to be honest, because the guy who was on duty in the transporter room while Miles was like grabbing the pattern, enhancers, he was like, there's a really good chance that your particles are going to be scattered into a million different pieces. And like, that'll be that. Like
I
he
didn't
does
hear him say
it.
that.
Yeah. So he had a 50% chance of dying in this transporter. Yeah.
Okay, so
I
then
think
my rant is valid. What
your
the
rant
F?
is super
Who
valid.
does that? Who does that?
And you just had a baby and you're like, do. Like, stop trying to be Captain Enterprise. Come up with a different plan.
So he had a 50% chance of dying, which to me says, how about you just transport the pattern enhancers down there?
Yeah,
you don't
if
need
they don't make it.
If you don't make it, that's a problem. If they don't make it, you just transport some more. And you just keep transporting them until some of them get down there. Because guess what?
They needed to have 3 bodies so that they could...
Everyone knows how to turn those things on. You set them up, you twist it.
You twist it like a ballpoint pen.
Yeah. I'm not even on the Enterprise. I know how to set those up. So you just keep beaming until they get down there. The away team will figure it out. There was no reason whatsoever for O'Brien to go down.
Did you notice how cavalier O'Brien was too? Where they were like 50% chance you might die. And O'Brien was like, I'm pretty sure I could make it. And I was like, what are you basing that off of? A feeling? Like, what do you... it was akin to like hold my beer and watch this and you're like famous last words, it's like I'm pretty sure I can make it. You don't have any basis of like information to go off of that's like my like unless you're like I just have a gut feeling I'm gonna make it down there. Yeah, we don't go off of those.
Yeah, so I blame O'Brien for this really risky maneuver for no good reason. And I secondarily blame Picard for okaying this risky maneuver for no good reason. Like, I was like, Picard, has he been taken over by an electricity monster? Because he's just like 50-50 chance. That's good enough for my crew. Since when? Anyways, he makes it. He's fine. No worries. As they're setting up these transporter enhancers, they all get struck by lightning. And they hit the ground hard. And I actually have a funny story about this. It's actually not funny at all. But I have a story about this. I was like, why did I write funny story in my notes? It's not funny. I heard Marina Sirtis, who's the actress who plays Troy, talk about this scene specifically, where when they said, go, all the actors had to throw themselves onto the ground as hard as they could. So when they said go, she threw herself as hard as she could backwards and ended up breaking her tailbone when she hit the ground.
Oh my God.
And she had bed rest for the next 6 weeks after filming this scene. And she said, when I saw the scene on screen, I was so disappointed that I was so tiny in the scene. It could have been Worf wearing my costume. So she was really throwing herself into the role literally and physically and got hurt. And when she went and looked at the results, it was like, wow, that was so unnecessary. Like you can't even tell it was me. And I never forgot that little quote from her. So as they're passed out, and poor Marina Sirtis is probably in severe pain in this scene as she's laying there. As they pass out, these little balls of light come down from the cloud and hover over all of them. They enter all of their bodies except for Riker. Kind of hovers over Riker, and then it like flies away real fast. And I wrote in my notes because I didn't remember this at all. And I was like, why did it just fly away? Is it because he was waking up? Was it scared off by that? Because that doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Why did they wait till they were passed out? Because that also doesn't make... Well, anyways, it flies away and it's a big mystery until later on when Beverly unveils that mystery. But Riker wakes up when the others don't. He wakes up and he's like, right? It doesn't make... So anyways,
because if you were conscious and a little ball of light was flying towards you, what are you going to do? Shoot your phaser at it? Like there was nothing you could have done.
What are you going to do? Run? Hide?
Yeah.
Like,
okay, but whatever.
No reason. Right. And they also, the balls of light could have also entered them from behind, and then they would have not even like through their backs or something, and they wouldn't have never known. They would have just been like, doop, doop, doop. Oh my gosh, So whatever. Anyway. They shocked them unconscious in order to do that, and then it didn't work on Riker. And so Riker wakes up and he stumbles towards the last pattern enhancer, twists it, and instantly they're all transported. So apparently that transporter operator on the ship has been just pushing the button over and over and over and over because he's not going to know when the pattern enhancers are there. Yeah. They don't have any sensors that work. So I guess he's just going energize, 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 energize. So when Riker turns it, it's like, but
if any of us had ever in our teen years tried calling a radio station to like win concert tickets, you know how that goes. Redial, redial, and then you give up.
The redial button was...
Try doing that on a rotary phone.
I was just going to say the redial button was an amazing invention because it's just like boop, 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 and it's it. You don't have to sit and turn the things.
Yeah.
So, okay, they get back to the ship.
Yeah, and Troy comes to violently.
In a terrifying way. I was like, what the heck? And I knew that they were taken over by these life forms just because I read the description. So I was like, okay, is it, do they know they're taking over? Because sometimes they don't know. Sometimes
Seems
they
like they
know.
don't. It seems like they don't know. Like she seems disoriented,
Mhm.
but herself. Like Data seems like himself. Miles seems nothing seems out of the ordinary.
I want to push back on that because when I was watching that scene, when Troy wakes up in the background, Miles is sitting on his table and Data's right behind him, and I can see a different body language on them. I mean, Miles is sitting in a way. Miles is sitting with his hand on his thigh. And I immediately said, that's different body posture. That's different posture.
So interesting that you picked up on that. I did not. I was like, everybody seems like normal. Troy,
I just don't hate O'Brien as much as you do.
I guess. He's just, I don't hate him. He's just such a third wheel. Ugh.
Yeah,
but like
he is.
He's just a non-entity in Enterprise. In TNG, he just shows up randomly, doesn't do anything. Every once in a while, he does something cool. But like I said, in Deep Space Nine, I was amazed because I didn't really rewatch that show until we started this podcast. And I started watching the show and I was like, oh, wow, there's like a whole character here. Why wasn't this guy part of
where were you, dude?
We could have just skipped TNG and just put him on that show. Well, anyways, they are going into the only thing that's a little bit weird is when they're in the turbo lift, Data's speech glitches, which I believe is a first to my recollection that we've heard this particular thing happen to Data.
And that do you think that was Data trying to say something? Because the quote was missing data. It was garble gobble missing data.
Ooh.
So it's like a little Data was
like
the real Data was trying to say, hey, I'm in here.
Ooh, I wonder. I mean, I don't know if I've heard glitches. Remember in the pilot episode, he was trying to whistle and he couldn't do it well. But like, that's kind of the only thing. But this,
unless maybe when Lord did something to him, possibly, or something.
Yeah.
But I don't think so. I think
makes me wonder how they did it.
The first one. Yeah. And it sounds super cool. I was just like, it's kind of like, oh yeah, Data's an android, right? Like it's that memory of like, oh, he does have speech processors, not just like vocal cords.
Yes.
But that's the only thing that seems a little bit off. But again, as they're kind of walking to the bridge and stuff, I'm like, do they know yet? Are they aware? Like, what is this consciousness swap situation right now? Because sometimes when they have mind control situations, it's turned on and off. Sometimes it's turned up gradually. So I really didn't know. And then when Troy storms onto the bridge and is like, Captain, I need to talk to you right away. And when she goes in to talk to him, I was like, she actually still sounds like Troy. So I was like, that's interesting.
That's what I thought. I was like, did these life forms like enact like and go, or something?
Because they had no time to talk to each other privately. As far as we've seen, they've been in sick bay and then they were with Riker. So we're like, when did they coordinate these efforts? Which is another good question. Like, did they communicate as little balls of light telepathically or something? Like, are they communicating with each other? I guess not, because Troy doesn't know what happens next. But anyways, it's just like, how did they coordinate this? And also when they take over the consciousness, apparently they also take over all of their memories of the host, which is mind-blowing. Like, these are some super fascinating alien consciousness spirit.
They're using the body in whatever means that they need to. So physically, but also can like harvest data from the brain. Like that is actually a really, really cool idea.
I'm not sure if they knew everything. They may have just accessed the top layers of information.
They maybe could have, but the way Troy is like, if I were, if this host body were to be like counseling Picard on what to do, these would be the steps that she would do like first. And I was like, oh, that's interesting that like, know that. And also scary because now you're using it to your advantage against Picard and everybody. So yeah, Deanna's like, hey, I really need to talk to you. I really feel this like strong pull towards the southern pole of the planet. And like out of the ready room on the bridge, Data is saying we should probably start coordinating our search and create this like systematic, like top to bottom or bottom to top search of the planet. Let's start at the southern pole. And Riker's like, yeah, but like, we're going to go ahead and start
here.
Let's just start here where we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. We can, it's a sphere. You can go in any direction. So it's whatever. And before you know it, Ensign Rowe was like, Commander, did you override the heading? And Riker's like, Data, why are we heading towards the southern pole again? What's going on? Data doesn't respond. And then like Kung Fu knocks him across the bridge. And I was like, oh, this is bad.
Yeah, it was so sudden. I did not see that coming at all. Suddenly we're in an action movie. It went from like
all of a sudden
heading 4.53.2, whatever. And then suddenly Data hits Riker. Riker goes flying. Worf tries to shoot Data. And then for some reason, O'Brien is still on the bridge.
On the bridge.
We don't know why he's still there, but he's still, what shouldn't you be in the transporter room? But he's still there. So he knocks out Worf. So then Ro tries to knock out O'Brien. So then O'Brien knocks out Ro, and you're just like back and forth and back and forth.
Yeah,
and
it happens so fast.
Well, and the fact that O'Brien's a better shot than Ensign Ro, that's I call bullshit on that.
Yes, agreed. Ro is going to be clearly the best shot on that bridge. Her and
she
Worf,
is,
but like they're the fighters,
but
and O'Brien is not.
Again, where do they get phasers from? I know you didn't come to like report to duty on the bridge with just a phaser on your hip, just walking around. Where
did the away team, right?
Phasers come from?
They had phasers in sick bay. Like, what was going on? Y'all just got in the turbo lift. Who knows? But they all had phasers. Everyone had phasers. There's a huge phaser fight, and Picard's like, "What's that noise?" And he turns around, and Troy knocks him out. And I was like, "Oh, so they do know. They all know who they are."
She used that same double-fisted punch that she used on Jev and took Picard down, like threw him into a wall and knocked his ass cold out. I was like, "Oh my God."
But as all this battle is going on, Riker kind of stumbles up, and he's just like, "Computer security lockout, Riker 301 or whatever." And it's like, everything shuts down as Data's on it. And Data's like, "Ah!" And he gets all mad and hits the panel, which is really fun because you never get to see this character be mad at all or frustrated or anything.
Well, android strength is always fun. Like when Data always pries doors open to save people out of burning
he didn't smash
buildings.
The panel.
I'm surprised he didn't smash it either. I did love that the director's
would have been more
choice.
Realistic.
It would have been more realistic.
I did love the director's choice of having the shot be on the panel, and when the panel goes black, you just see Data's reflection, like smashing at it. And I was like, ooh, not only do you have android strength, but you have angry android strength. Like, this is hella cool.
He should have put a dent in it, and then he would have known that his strength is greater than a human's and been like, aha. And he would have totally used that, which he didn't really use.
Well, he did when he smashed that panel, like in the hallway later. But yeah, I was like, if he smashed that hallway panel using just like his forearm, his whole fist coming down on a comm panel probably would have broke that thing like right out of the floor. But whatever, it looked really cool though. And I love that Data and O'Brien and Troy kind of all come together, and she's like, "What happened? He would have moved to the Southern Pole for me. Like, why didn't you wait?" But this
and he would have moved to the Southern Pole for her
because he trusts her. He
Yeah.
totally trusts her. He would have done it. Like, how many times has Troy said, "I get a sense that XYZ," and he's like, "Okay, we're gonna go with that.
Let's go."
Mhm.
So
the
lucky for them.
Invading Data though was so trigger happy. I mean, he's just violent through the whole thing.
Yep.
Yes, that's a super violent.
He was not patient.
Criminal.
And he also said, like, when she was like, "What happened?" He was just like, "He would have moved to the Southern Pole," and she was like, "He would have done it. The captain would have done it for me in like 2 more minutes. All you had to do was wait." And that character is very impulsive, which is lucky for them because they would have absolutely done it They would have done it. They wouldn't have known anything was wrong until it was far too late. But because this got escalated so fast, it went from like a let's try to trick them situation to a massive hostage situation.
Yes.
They go storming out. They go tearing through the ship. Riker's fine. Worf is fine. Ro is fine. So they all had phasers, but they were all set on like minimum stun. So that's lucky.
Yes.
Picard,
they seem
I guess,
to be
just has a
totally
headache.
unfazed.
He's
They're
fine.
he's like, he comes out like massaging his neck, like, what happened? I will say a couple of things about this. I love how quickly the command team enacts emergency procedures against Troy and Data and O'Brien.
Yeah.
They never bother to even calm them to be like, "Counselor Troy, like, what is going on?" Because if this is a person that you work with, that you trust in life and death situations, if they start acting strangely, my first thing would be like, we need to talk right away. Like, what is happening? But immediately they're like, "Invaders."
Yep.
Shut everything down.
They're like, we don't know what happened to them, but they are not on the group plan.
They are not.
That's basically what happened
very
there.
much not on the group plan.
Future memory. I mean, we would react in the way that we react because we live now, but they live in the future.
This is
so
true.
They have a different perspective.
Yeah, they're like invaders.
And I think military has that training of, when there's danger, here's what you do. And they train military and I guess like police force and FBI and stuff like that. They train for these kinds of situations. And they train really, really hard, so they don't have to think in these situations. They just automatically
hope that they train really, really hard, so they don't have to think.
Yes. Yeah, I mean that's the point of the training. They have to literally go against human nature, because human nature would be, "Hey, Bob, what's wrong?" But like if Bob's got a shotgun and he's coming up into the office, like it's emergency procedure.
Yeah,
Bob
it's no
Schmob.
time to be doing
like,
that.
yeah, you can be all friendly once he's contained, once everything's safe. Then after everything is okay and he's in handcuffs, you can be like, hey Bob, what's wrong? Right? Like there's like a time and a place. And I buy that because they're all military, that they're like super trained and they know their friends have gone off the deep end and all they know is they try to take over the ship and they're not taking the ship. They are not taking this ship.
Yeah, we can have a talk about this when you're like in the brig.
When you're saying again, because we don't know what's going on right now.
It was nice to see that the Roga Danar school of evading detection is still up and running, because I love these scenes when like, security team is trying to lock shit down and whoever's escaping and evading is just like 2 steps ahead of them every time. They shut down the turbo lift and then the security team swarms the turbo lift only to find like their comm badges on the floor, and then they set up force fields, and then Data smashes the panel and uses his like android body as like a conductor to like short out the force field, and then they keep going. I was like, damn, this is Roga Danar's like escaping detection and like evading arrest. Like I love to see this. And they bust in on 10 forward, and this is where the problem starts for me, because Keiko is in there with a screaming baby that's been like red in the face, so has been screaming for a long time, and it feels to me like the people who I can only imagine why will take like an infant to like a movie theater and then the baby cries the whole time in the movie. It's like, please get up and leave with the baby. Please go. You have quarters that you can be hanging out in. And Keiko, I'm sorry, but her little like, shh.
But see, here's my thing. Okay, here's my thing with this scene. I hear you that when a baby is crying in a movie theater, you need to take that baby out of the movie theater, because why did you bring an infant to a movie theater, right? Like, I get that. But some other times, like in this case, before they walked in, I don't have any excuse for her. But after they walked in, I'm like, but like, what do you expect her to do? She doesn't have diapers. She doesn't have formula. She doesn't have a binky. She doesn't have a bottle. She doesn't have a crib.
She can't whip a boob out on TV in 1989.
Right. And who knows even if they've been breastfeed in the 24th century. So it's just like, at this point, what exactly do you expect her to do to calm this baby? She can't put the baby to bed. She can't feed the baby. I'm
not worried about what happens after the hostage situation starts. Like that, she's kind of screwed. At the most, she could probably just like get up and kind of do that like jiggly walk where you walk and like bounce the baby. At most, that's what she could have done. But
which is nothing if the baby needs to be changed or sleep or eat. Yeah, right? It's nothing. No, it's going to do nothing.
I get that, but I'm not talking about once the hostage situation starts. I'm talking about everything is cool and chill and 10 forward. And she's just, I mean, how many times have we seen like a mom at like a coffee shop with the baby that won't stop screaming? And it's like, at some point you got to take that kid out of there.
Well, and Keiko was alone too. When they walked in, she was by herself. She wasn't even with anybody.
Yeah.
So who goes to 10 forward by yourself with your baby?
Screaming.
All right, you guys have a good point. Why? Well, the baby wasn't screaming at first. The baby was like cooing and she was showing off the baby.
No, she was crying the whole time. Like from the first minute we saw Keiko in 10 forward, that baby was like wailing and screaming her head off. And that's when I was like, girl, it's time for you to take that baby home.
And if you had done that, none of the rest of this would have happened.
Thank you. Thank you. Molly wouldn't have been a freaking hostage if Keiko would have just accepted the rules of society and not created this giant faux pas by taking this howling infant, like, and just leaving, like, just hanging out with her there for like hours and 10 forward. I was like, girl, get that baby home, please. We're all here to try to have a drink and play some like space chess. Nobody needs to hear the screaming baby. Oh. Anyway, okay, Candace, you're the one among us who's a mom.
Oh,
what's your take?
Okay.
What's your take on this?
I wouldn't have had Molly in the 10 forward. I wouldn't have taken her there.
And that's why we can be friends.
Yeah.
That was the only right answer, by the way. There was no other answer she could have possibly said right now.
but as somebody who appreciates movie plots and twists, the character Keiko had to be there in 10 forward so that there could be a conflict with O'Brien.
Yeah.
So that because there wasn't anything else written for the O'Brien entity other than that scene where he's just awful, nasty rapist, right?
Yes, totally.
So they had to do something to add a little nuance and flavor to that entity. It would have been just like most O'Brien scenes, just an extra character.
while this is going on, they have this amazing action sequence where they just evade everything. They end up in 10 forward instead of engineering for some reason, probably because the deck they had to get off on, they couldn't go where they were trying to go.
That's a good point.
Yeah, because they stopped the turbo lifts. They put up the force fields. They blocked the Jeffries tubes. I'm sure at least they should have that in their protocols at some point from all the people who escaped through Jeffries tubes. And so they end up in 10 forward and they're just like, they walk in and everybody's like, what's going on? And Keiko's even like, Miles? And then Worf runs in with the security team. And then a huge phaser fight breaks out. Worf actually shoots at, I think, Troy or something, or maybe Miles. And I was like, fool, there's a whole crowd of unarmed pedestrians behind him. Who fires into a... You are the head of security, sir. What are you doing right now?
Did get there were a couple of people that were just hanging out in 10 forward who did get shot. So at least that part was realistic.
Because Troy turned around and started shooting everyone she could find. She was just like, pew, pew, pew. I was like, these people are just, if they stand up, if they sit down, if they look at her funny, she's just shooting everybody in there. And I was like, Worf started this. You do not run into a room full of just a crowd of people civilians, and start shooting full of civilians who are just like sipping their tea. Like that I thought was a horrible decision. And then the fact that everyone starts getting shot, I was like, oh my gosh, this is terrifying. And then you just see Keiko and the baby like climb behind some table that fell over. And she's just like, I hope I don't get shot. I hope we don't get shot. I hope we don't get shot. And I just thought this is a really terrifying scenario right now. Even though the phasers were not on like kill, still, I wouldn't want to get hit with a phaser.
It hits too close to home for all the gun violence that we are experiencing in our country currently, that it's like, this is a scenario that could actually happen. And you replace phasers with guns. And it's exactly like, I live in a very safe neighborhood and 2 blocks away, there was a shooting. And it's like last week. And the whole neighborhood has been like shook up about it. Right. But it's like, oh my God. And literally people were having like a block party when all this happened. So you're just out eating a hot dog, enjoying some summer air and chatting with the neighbors. You're at 10 forward, having yourself a tea and trying to tolerate the screaming child. And man, like all of a sudden it's like this huge gunfight with a bunch of civilians. You're right. Like that's such horrible planning. Like I've said it before and I'll say it again. Worf is not good at his job. He's not.
He's too Klingon. Well, he is a Klingon. You know, he has his Klingon instinct.
I would have been okay if he ran in there with a batleth. I would have been fine with that. Because the batleth would have been very specific to the person he was trying to cut in half. It wouldn't have flown into the crowd.
I don't understand why, as a Klingon, he doesn't carry his batleth. He should. I don't care if he's a Star Trek starship
maybe because it's super heavy.
What is it? Federation officer. He should still be able to carry the weapon of choice for a Klingon.
I mean, it would sure as hell make a lot more sense for this gunfight at the OK Corral that like went down.
Yeah.
But it was awful.
But you know what, again, looking back at it, it was 25 or 30 years ago. And they didn't have the gun violence that we have today.
Yes.
Then. Yeah. I mean, I don't think there'd ever been a school shooting when I was a teenager ever.
No, like mass shootings were not a thing. I'm sure they happened at some points in history, but not with the like alarming frequency that we have today.
Yeah.
So that one actually for me was a little bit tough to watch because I was like, oh my God, you replace phasers with guns and it could be anywhere in America at this point.
Yeah.
Which is really freaking terrifying.
Which is another way that Star Trek has told the future.
Yeah, I guess it kind of has. Well, interesting little story point about this is that none of the like invaders, like none of the imposters seem to be affected whatsoever by the phasers. It's like getting hit with like a Nerf pellet or something where it's like, oh, okay, like they feel it and like nothing. Right. So,
well, and also they're 200 or 300 years old and they still have the reactions that they had when they were in, bodies.
Well, I think that they just took over like the host bodies and because like they did, Data used his data strength a few times for things like he picked up Picard and choked him later in the episode. He like smashed the panels. Like, I think they just use like the strength of their host, but Picard immediately tries to like reason with the invaders and Troy is like, move the ship to the southern pole of the moon or I will start killing people. And I was like, oh, fuck. Like there's literally nothing you can do as Picard. It's like you have a ton of hostages in 10 forward. It was a smart place to go if you want to have a hostage situation.
It is a smart place to go. They ended up in the right place. And they also, because they have Well, I feel like all you really need is Data. Data is the ace in the hole because he knows everything about everything. But in this case, O'Brien was super impactful because together they all work together to isolate 10 Ford's computer systems from all the rest of the ship. So they just completely shut down 10 Ford for their own purposes, so that the bridge or anywhere else couldn't do anything. They couldn't get in there. They couldn't lock things down. They couldn't beam people out. There was no technology that could save them. And Picard turns to Beverly and is like, redo those scans because something weird happened with those three when they came back off the planet. And for some reason, Riker still seems okay. But I feel like if if I was in Picard's shoes, I'd be like, and Riker, take him too. You know what I mean? Because like, what if he's some kind of Trojan horse? He was there with them. The other three have lost their minds. I would be like, yeah, why don't you go ahead, go with Beverly? We're going to put some force fields around just to scan. And just make sure that was all okay. But
you have a point.
Right? Because you're like, yeah, Riker seems like he's okay, but the other ones seem like they were okay too.
Yeah.
So anyways.
Like everybody who was down on the planet meet in sickbay.
Yes. So Beverly's scans show that there is basically a superimposed life form in their neural patterns. So there is, she very quickly figures this out. Like there's some other pattern and it's probably a life form and it's taking over their brain and their bodies. And so this is actually a really kind of big question mark moment for the crew, for Picard and the rest to say, okay, now we know that there's a life form that's taken over their minds and their bodies. But then the question is, are they still alive in there?
Yeah.
Is Troy still there or is Troy gone? And now something has completely taken over her body forever, which is really sad to think you could lose a friend that way. It's awful. So they're like, well, Riker's like, why didn't I get affected? And Beverly figures that out in 2 seconds too. We got the Crusher genius.
I thought the same thing. I was like, boy, that was fast. She's like, there's this anionic electrical phenomena that's invaded their brains. And Riker, you were probably spared because you were in pain over your broken arm and your pain receptors were firing, which blocked the ball of energy. And maybe if we, cause the crew like some like superficial pain, the anionic electrical phenomena will leave. I was like, damn, that took like 1 second, Beverly. That's a little fast, even by Beverly standards.
You don't become the chief medical officer on the Federation's, flagship ship.
I guess
without being super smart, right?
I guess
this was some Wesley level smarts though, because she figured it really out so much faster. But
she's Wesley's mama, so of course she's smart.
Yeah, she's super smart. She figured it out with like no effort, so yay for her. And then the question was, okay, once we cause pain and get those life forms to leave, how do we trap them? So she figures, well, they were trapped in that cloud on the planet. So if I just kind of remake whatever was going on in that cloud, it could probably trap them here too. So she figures even that out. And it's going to take her about an hour to design the whatever that's going to make this force field or beam or whatever happen that can trap these beams of light, which is super important because one, as Geordi said, we need something that neutralizes data. If it doesn't neutralize data, it doesn't count because they were like, we'll just put the anesthecine gas and just knock everybody out, but it won't work on data. So if it doesn't work on all three of them, there's no point. So it has to be something that works on data. He's the linchpin. And then secondarily, once the little balls of light are out of them, they could just float into the next guy and then the next guy and the next guy. So we have to find some way to keep them from doing that. And then take those little balls of light, kick them off our effing ship. So it's going to take Beverly about an hour to figure this out. In the meantime, they're like, all right, how do we figure out how to do this? And Ro and Geordi put their heads together and they're like, we've got a plan. We can go in, we can drill a little hole, which is such FBI tactics too, when there's a hostage situation, at least on TV. I don't know if they do this live, but on TV, they drill a little hole, they put in the camera, they see what's up, like they do all this stuff, they drop the flashbangs. So they're like, we can drill a little hole in the ceiling and we can see what's going on. Which by the way, I love the scene when they actually do it because the hole they drill is like, it's like minuscule. It's like a pinprick. But the device they use is gigantic. It's like bigger than a printer.
It's like a keg.
Yeah, it's like a beer keg. It's like a beer keg that they're dragging through the Jeffries tubes, which I just love the technology so much.
And they're up there in that Jeffries tube for an hour while they're waiting for Beverly. I mean, they're just hanging out in this Jeffries tube for an hour.
I think it was going to take them a while to build that machine. So they had to build it, and then it was taking them a while to calibrate it. So they built the thing, and then they were like, because remember, Geordi was like, oh, Picard, it's going to take such and such time for us to get all the calibrations down. And he was like, all right, Beverly, that's your time frame. Get it done in that amount of time. So yeah, they were in the Jeffries tube for like 45 minutes going, boop, a little to the right, boop, a little to the left. And somehow the circle was going to line up on the three of them. As long as they stood together, this plan was going to work. And I thought, you might need an inside man to make sure they stand.
And then all three of them are in the circle, and then they have to have dialogue about it.
Right? That was my thing too.
So
that drove me nuts. Even as a kid watching this for the first time, Ensign Rowe and Geordi are like, okay, they need to be in the circle. Why can't you just flood the entire room with that painful, like the pain beam? And then that way everybody would be in pain. So even if those like light beams fly out of them, everybody else will be in pain. So like nobody else can get like invaded.
That's smart, yeah.
But okay. So we've got this little circle and we've got the three invaders standing in this little circle for what feels like 45 minutes before Roe was like 3, 2. Oh, what was that, Geordi?
2.5.
Oh, nothing. Okay. 3,
3/4.
2. I was like, God damn it, just fire the thing. And of course, as they're getting ready to fire, Data walks out of the circle. And so it doesn't work. Like it works on,
Troy and
O'Brien.
Miles.
Yeah, on Miles and Troy. But like, it sucks. And at this point, Picard has traded places with the hostages. He's like, if you let those who need medical attention go, I will trade places with you. So we have a couple of developments that have happened up to this point. Counselor Troy says, I am actually Captain Shumar of the Essex. The Essex was caught in the electromagnetic storm and the bridge was struck by lightning. And as the ship was ripped apart, our consciousness was absorbed into the magnetic storm, which I'm like, okay, movie magic.
I mean, she did say, we don't know how. We just know that. And I thought
know that it happened.
That's fair.
Yeah. Because any kind of explanation they're going to give us is probably not going to be that great. Mm-hmm. So it's like, all right, so it happened. So at this point, we're assuming that Troy is Captain Shumar, right? And Captain Shumar is like, you're going to beam up the skeletal remains from the Essex and transport them to Earth for a proper burial. We are not asking for a lot. And Picard's
does sound very reasonable.
Super reasonable. And Picard was like, there's no need for all of this. Like, we'll gladly transport your remains back to home, back to Earth for like a burial. But Troy's like, I wish I could believe you. Right. And we can see like, even Picard does not believe that Troy really is like Captain Shumar.
Yeah, Troy doesn't believe Picard. Picard doesn't believe Troy. There is no trust here. There's no love lost. And because the entity, Shumar knows Troy. Troy also knows Picard, so Shumar knows Picard. So Shumar's like, I know that you don't trust me, and I don't trust you. Like I already know. And she says many, many times, I know you don't believe me. I know you don't trust me. Even now, you don't trust me. So she's like, that's why I need hostages, because you're not going to listen.
Manipulation.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So a little trivia on the Essex. So it was destroyed in 2167, 200 years before, the episode takes place. At 2167, that's really in terms of the life of the Federation. And I may be wrong here, but that's like at the very beginning of the Federation. So the standards of a Federation officer may or may not be different, but Shumar was not acting like a Federation officer.
Definitely. That was the same thing I thought. And Picard said the same too, where it's like, towards the tail end of the episode, Picard's like, wouldn't you think that Shumar would be much better behaved than the way that he's behaving, like in the body of Troy?
NCC 173, which if it's in chronological order, 173 is pretty low on the, it's pretty.
I know, because the Enterprise is 1701, so we're in the low 100s.
Yeah,
it's been a while. There's been a lot of ships.
Because we're here at the Essex, I just want to drop some info. The USS Essex was actually named after two different USS ships, United States ships. The first one was decommissioned in like 1972. No, it was 1969. And the second USS Essex was a Wasp-class landing helicopter dock, and it's still in service today. And that was commissioned in 1990 90. It was launched in 91. So the Essex was a ship that was actually, I think, because they named all these ships after the Enterprise is named after an Enterprise. I mean, they named all these ships after
real ships. Yeah, real naval ships.
So so that's what the Essex is, a Wasp-class boat that helicopters land on. So
cool.
there's my Navy trivia for you right there.
There you go. And then like 200 years after this, it crashes on this moon.
Yeah. So there's another Essex.
Yeah. Thanks for giving us that.
I really like Wasp class and Daedalus class and all this stuff. Like I don't know what those mean, and they don't mean anything at all to me, but the words are very cool.
That's
like
true.
it makes it sound very much like a superhero thing. Like it's a very, very, very cool names. So they try this.
You know who Daedalus was, right?
No.
Daedalus was he was the oh, sorry, go ahead, Candace. This was
you're the teacher. You're the teacher, and you're gonna have a better
well, I only know about Daedalus because I'm obsessed with Greek mythology, but Daedalus was a master craftsman
I remember.
Was a mortal who was so good at his skill and craft that like he basically was like captured by a Titan nymph, Pasiphae, who like kept him like imprisoned on her island of Crete, and he would like make wonders for her. He had a son, Icarus, who they later escaped as Daedalus made those like big wax wings and they jumped off of a cliff to like escape Crete. And Icarus had spent his entire life in captivity and in confinement. So it was like his first taste of freedom and was like so excited to get to be like flying on these giant wings. And he flew too close to the sun and the sun melted the wax and he fell down into the ocean and died. And that was super sad. But Daedalus was a very, very interesting character. And one of my all-time favorite books, Circe, tells the story, like that perspective of like who Daedalus was and how like as a mortal, gods don't take the time to know your name, because by the time we learn your name, like you're dead already. So you have to be like a titan among mortals to like catch their attention, which I was like, ooh, cool. That was kind of nice to hear Daedalus's name again. I was like, hey, I know you, kind of. I know of you in stories, sort of. Anyway.
She did a much better job of explaining who he was than I would have. I would have just said he was a Greek dude who made stuff.
That's probably... This episode is going to run so long. That's probably should have just been what happened. Anyway. So this pain circle doesn't work. It does not work. And Data is the one who's left standing outside of it. So he sees what's happening to his fellow imposters and grabs Picard because he's impulsive, grabs Picard by the throat and lifts him by the throat. And he's like, stop this or I will kill everybody in this room. And it's like,
he will.
And he would. And he would.
And this is that point where you know that the director is not the director who normally directs, because the close-up on that Data and Picard scene is so close.
It is. It's like
major close-up.
You could see like pores. Yeah, it was super close. Now at this point, Captain is like, okay.
Calls it off. Troy gets up and she is none too pleased. Nope. She's like furious. And so they're like, you know what? Like, we can't trust you to do what we want you to do. We need you to just send all the transporter commands to us so that we can transport our skeletal remains on the ship, because we can't even trust you guys to do that. Clearly, we can't trust you to keep your word. So then Picard goes, okay, how about this? We go to Cargo Bay 4. You can leave all the hostages here, go there. I'll guarantee you safety, safe passage all the way there. And you can transport to your heart's desire. And they're like, how can we trust you? We can't trust him. He's lying, all this stuff. And then they're like, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take some hostages for our protection and safety. Give us all the transporter codes and we will do this deal. So they do. And I love that earlier when Picard left to go be a hostage, he told Riker, I want you to take every, chance that you can to try to end this conflict. But if it doesn't work, I will provide you with an opportunity. Like, I'll figure it out. And here, when he's giving them safe passage, he comes over to Riker and he's like, this is an opportunity. Number one, this is an opportunity. And he's like, aha, we're going to Cargo Bay 4. So they're like, okay. So they get safe passage. They take some hostages. Of course, Data takes Worf because he's been trying to punk Worf this whole time. Troy takes Picard because it's like captain to captain. And Miles takes Keiko because he's a creep. And he's been like leering at her for the last 45 minutes. So she leaves the
creep.
Yeah, she leaves the baby.
And tried to like make out with her and grab her. Ugh.
So she leaves the baby with some random like babysitter who pops up in 10 forward because why not? And she, please let the baby stay. I'm like, really? You're going to kidnap her and her baby? Come on. Like, come on, Miles. Get it together. So he's a creep. So he takes her and they get to Cargo Bay just fine. And this when they're in there and they're, messing with the transporter pad and O'Brien's trying to bring up the skeletal remains or whatever, before Troy explains everything, I I was also wondering why Cargo Bay 4, like, I don't understand what the opportunity is. And so was Ro. So Riker explains to Ro, there's only one reason why he would pick Cargo Bay 4. And I was like, what's the one reason? What's special about Cargo Bay 4? Like, other than Cargo Bay 3 or 2 or 27, like, who cares? And then he says, because there's, I guess Cargo Bay 4 also doubles as a shuttle bay or something, because it's got a blast door that you can open out into the vacuum of space. So he was like, if this doesn't go well, like if we can't have them stand down and get the hostages free, we're just going to blow the shuttle bay. We're just going to blow the door in Cargo Bay 4 and kill them all. And it's like, oh my gosh.
See, the stakes.
These are the kind of decisions I cannot make, which is why I would not be on the bridge of, which is why I wouldn't be on a ship. I just wouldn't be on the ship. I'd be at home painting or making, or I just couldn't do this. This is like so much pressure. Like
not being in the military. Yeah.
And how many times has Riker had to like almost kill Picard, or Picard had to almost kill Riker, or they have to make these decisions where they're like, close the blast doors. It sucks that people are in there, but if we don't do that, we're going to kill everybody else. It's just really hard decisions.
Yeah. So Riker, even Keiko is standing by that decision.
Yeah.
I would do anything to protect my child.
They have this, they have this
good mom call.
Beautiful moment where Riker is ready to push the button if need be. And they have the standoff. But before they have the standoff, they find out the truth. They find out that, surprise, surprise, it's not really Captain Schumacher.
Yes.
And is anyone surprised? No one's surprised at this point. But as they're beaming up the quote unquote skeletal remains, Troy spills the beans. And she's like, all right, you're right, Picard. I'm not really Captain Schumacher, but I did absorb all his memories, which is why I knew all those dates and facts and figures when you were trying to test me and see if I was really Captain Schumacher. So she's like, what happened is our consciousnesses were stripped from our bodies and stuck on this moon. It's a penal colony. It's a prison. And our consciousness, all of us have been imprisoned on this moon for over 500 years, which I thought was like,
that's not a life sentence. That's like an eternity sentence. That's like,
yeah, that's cruelty beyond cruelty.
It's
I don't
so
care
cruel,
how much of a criminal you are. Yeah.
Yeah. They're all die.
Yeah. They're all condemned prisoners, and they've just been floating around there for 500 years. And they almost got off the moon with the Essex, but the Essex wasn't powerful enough to escape like the EM storms.
Well, yeah. The not cruel thing to do, the kind thing to do would just be to destroy the moon so that they all die.
Yes, that's what I thought. That's what I thought too.
You can't just destroy a moon. Like, moons are important for planets. You can't just like
photon. Can you send like photons to destroy the clouds?
Like, you can destroy a moon, but you shouldn't. You should not destroy the moon.
There's got to be some. There's got to be
some way to like end them.
Euthanasia. That's what I'm looking for.
Yeah,
euthanize them. Yeah, because that's just cruel beyond cruelty.
I don't know.
And I don't think even the people who are on the planet that created this penal colony, they might not even be around anymore.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's probably like unexpected, because they said like they were dropped off there, and like something about the electromagnetic storms like stripped their consciousness out of their bodies.
Well, so that was Troy said that the electromagnetic storm stripped their mind when she was Captain Schumacher. But now she's telling the truth and saying that this was their punishment. On their planet, in their system, their consciousnesses in Uxmal were ripped out of their bodies and then deposited on this moon as a punishment. Like, this was done on purpose, which is just awful. And it's actually impressive that these three are not totally insane, because you would be totally insane. But they are like clever and cunning and like collected. And even the little bit of, even the Miles being a creep and even Data being trigger happy is nothing compared to 500 years of imprisonment and what that would do.
Insanity. That would drive anybody insane.
So we find out that happened. She's like, we're not transporting up our skeletal remains. We're transporting up all of our fellow inmates so that we can take over these 1,000 bodies on the ship and finally escape this prison and have a body again and have a life again. It does beg some questions, like when that body dies, what happens to their consciousness now? Does it pop into another body? I don't know. There's still some questions here, but this is their chance to escape, because the Enterprise is in orbit, whereas the Essex had crashed and they were trying to get it back out, and then it crashed again.
Yeah.
But the Enterprise is in orbit, and they're like, this is our chance to finally escape. So that's when Picard's like, actually, no. Beverly floods the thing with her magical powers that trap the entities. And they're like, you better let them go or else. And Picard's like, no, your bargaining chips are officially done. Now that I know the whole story, you're trying to beam up all your friends. No. We will just blow this door and suck everybody out into space. Me, you, all of them. And Data's like, that's crazy. You would die. And he's like, I would absolutely die to save this crew. And you know, the officers that you guys are inhabiting, they would die as well. And that's when Keiko steps up and is like, I would happily die for my baby. And that's when Worf steps up and he's like, it's always a good day to die. I'm Klingon, you know, and they're like, crap, you know, they're trying to call their bluff, and they know these characters, they know these crew members, they know they will absolutely 100% die rather than let these people invade their minds and take their ship and fly off to their planets. That's not happening. That's not happening.
Yeah.
So they're just kind of like, all right, fine. And then Troy says, you better not pass this way again, Picard. It's like, what do you think? You think he's going to come here for summer vacation?
Yeah.
We're going to put
What are they going to
buoys in
do?
the
How are they
air.
going to get out? If they can't get off the moon before, how are they going to get off the moon?
Yeah.
then?
Yeah. And
So stupid.
now knowing what he knows, Picard is going to set up some like buoys
Yeah,
all
some
around the
buoys.
moon to be like,
Don't come
not
to this planet.
don't come
The
to
end.
this moon. The
And,
end.
and
The Federation is full of really curious people who are going to want to study the colony too. You know, they're going to
Yeah.
want to study the moon and study how they did. You know,
Yes.
there's always scientists who want to study these things.
Well, they end up, Troy and Miles and Data's bodies get released by the entities who like float back with their like compatriots and get transported back to the moon. And it felt really cruel to me. It felt like shades of like Vagra
Vagra
2. It felt
Yeah.
like shades of Armis, where they just left Armis like screaming in agony and like despair and insanity. And that's what it felt like. And I was like, damn, that was ice cold. Although maybe this would have gone differently had they like tried a different tactic and not been like violent and like did all the shit that they did. I understand why Picard made that choice, but it also felt like, to me, it felt like those on Uxmal who condemn these prisoners, that planet may not even be alive anymore. Or they may, it's almost like, somebody who's sent to a prison and then the prison gets shut down, but nobody tells the prisoners inside that they're like free to go. So they're just there forever. It's like, no, I don't even know if the founders intended for you to be immortally in this like horrible existence for 500 years. Like that's a lot.
I agree.
In Memory Alpha, Uxmal gets 3 sentences.
So that's all we learned
know,
about it.
We know nothing about Uxmal.
So this is similar to the episode we had with Vagra 2, where Armis was trapped on this planet forever. I felt no sorrow for Armis. Armis is a serial killer. He's a monster. He is literally the skin of evil, and I don't want him off the planet. So I get that it's like super sad that he's in isolation, but I'm not seeing an alternative here. Like I don't want him on my ship, and I don't want him on my planet, and I don't want him roaming around the galaxy free to cause havoc and murder people left and right.
Just for fun.
Well, and
just
the
for
Prime-
fun,
I
he
think
literally
the
enjoys it. I'm not okay with that.
The Prime Directive probably prohibits them from euthanasia.
Oh, please.
Even though that would be the polite thing
Prime
to do. Not the
Directive
polite, but
is-
the compassionate thing to do.
The Prime Directive is a suggestion. We all know that. It's just a suggestion. If they really felt like this is the right thing to do to let them die peacefully, they would have made it happen. But how do you kill a consciousness?
Yeah.
If there was an answer to that, that would have also given them peace, because I really don't feel like they want to keep going. They just want to get off the moon, but I don't think they want to really just like, it's not like they're like, I just want to live, that's not
they're
it.
like,
They're
no,
like,
we just want like peace.
we just want peace. So if they could have, I think if there was a way to destroy their consciousnesses, they probably would have been like, cool, let's do that then. Like plan B, we can get off the planet, plan B.
I don't think we knew what they were going to do after they got on the ship either. What was
Well,
their
they were
plan
going to take
after
over
that?
they were going to take over all the bodies.
Oh.
And then just like be alive again.
And then just be
live out
alive
their
again.
life. Yeah.
And just live out their lives. But the 500 years, you're not going to be sane enough to be running a starship and a daycare and all this stuff. Like this is not, they just wanted to escape the moon, right? Any ways possible. So I think if there was a way to destroy those consciousnesses, they probably would have done it, but I don't know what that way is. And they're just like a ball of electricity. So I don't know, but I didn't think it was cold. I think they like escaped barely, and they need to like get as far away from that place as possible, get as far away from that moon as possible. Again, I don't want these people from this moon on my ship or in my planet, because they're just not safe. They're not safe. They're not stable. If there was a way to rehab them, if there was a way to really give them peace, if there was a way to maybe make like a holodeck thing on their planet where they could at least pretend to have bodies, or I don't know, if there was a way to help them, yes, but not by them coming on my ship and invading my crew. So
I could see that. I could totally see that.
I didn't feel sad. I was just like, nope, bye guys. Bye. We're done.
Yeah. So they end up just beaming them back to the moon and sort of all's well that ends well. And Keiko is like, I'm just happy to have my husband back. And Molly's happy to have her dad back. And I was like, I would have some sort of feelings about this.
I would have some feelings.
It would take me a minute to like be okay with my husband being back to his normal self again. I'd be
being a creep.
Yes, I'd be really glad, but also like, I really have some shit I need to unpack.
Or like, are you sure it's you? You sure it's you?
I don't know. I've been married for 25 years. I get really pissed at him and then forgive him 10 seconds later. So,
what if he were taken over by an electricity monster or something,
and then
was
rapey.
a totally different personality?
Yeah, but
then he changed back. Would you? But then he changed back. Would you be like, oh yeah, he changed, or would you be like,
but I would know it wasn't him.
You would know when it is him.
It was, yeah. I mean, she almost after
knew
the
immediately.
second Miles,
Yeah.
she knew it wasn't him.
She did.
Yeah,
I think
she was
after
like,
the first
Miles.
She didn't know it was him. Yeah.
Yes. When he came in and they all started shooting, she was like, Miles, what are you? And then it was like, this isn't him. Like the fact that you live in a universe where your loved one could just be taken over by an electricity monster is kind of freaking terrifying.
Yeah.
That's kind of a scary thing that's like a possibility.
And but then Keiko gets her revenge when she gets taken over by an entity in Deep Space Nine. A few years later. So
I did not know that.
So now we're even.
We're back. Yeah.
Because in a world of many generations of a TV show, you have to redo the plot multiple times.
Yeah, you totally do.
There's only so many plots you can.
Yeah, right. So Candace, as our guest, we want to start with you. What were your final thoughts wrapping up, like after you finished watching this episode?
One of the reasons why I like Keiko so much is, it did end with her and forgiving Miles because it wasn't Miles, and that family dynamic. I mean, they ended on a family dynamic. So that was nice. And I think at that point in the series, they are prepping the Miles Keiko storyline to move over to Deep Space Nine, because the last season of Star Trek was the first season of Deep Space Nine. So there was concurring stories going on at that point. So I think they were prepping those two characters, but they already knew they were moving them over. And in terms of the storyline, there was a lot that wasn't believable. And there was that scene at the very beginning where Worf is up at his station on the bridge and Picard's head pops up, and there's just we didn't talk about that at the beginning, but there's just all these things that were kind of weird and off. But I like the ending, and I like the way that Keiko and Miles and Molly were sort of like the last scene of the story.
Yeah, it is kind of sweet because he goes, if I could have stopped that thing inside of me, I would have.
He says, if I could have killed it.
Yes, there
and
you're
like, he would have.
He sure would have.
We all know that.
He would have.
Yeah. He would have absolutely.
Which is reassuring to know. It's reassuring to know that it's like I was doing everything I could to stop it and kill it, and like I couldn't. So so glad that there's some closure on that. Shereese, what are your final thoughts on this episode?
This episode was very exciting. This was the same old electricity monster takes over the crew plot that we've seen many a time, but with a twist. And to me, this episode feels like it redeemed all those other similar episodes in season 1. Like all those episodes where we were like, oh, this is dumb. This makes no sense. I feel like this is what they were going for. This right here. This felt to me like a second chance at episodes I didn't love.
They had to have 4 seasons to make up for season 1.
That's right. And I feel like this one really, really did. Like this is what they were going for in my mind. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was just, I agree with you completely. They had very similar episodes in earlier seasons. And this one was like the masterclass of like how it should have gone. And I'm glad that they were able to recycle that idea and make it something really, for me, it was very memorable. I think it's a great episode all around. I really enjoy it. It's one that I rewatch over and over again. I really, really like it a lot. Candace, we've really loved having you with us to nerd out with us. Where can listeners find you? Go ahead and plug your pluggables.
My podcast is gratitudegeek.com, gratitudegeek.com, because I am a geek and I'm full of gratitude. And it's a fun show. I interview business owners about relationship marketing. I have a good time.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being part of our nerddom and nerding out for like way too long over this episode. And this is what always happens whenever we have a guest. The episodes go really long because everybody has a lot to say, which is, if you think about it, way better than the alternative where nobody has anything good to say about it. Shereese, of course, I love nerding out with you. As always, guys, next week we are talking season 5, episode 16, Ethics. Thanks for nerding out with us. We will see you then.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for geeking out with us. Be sure to join the crew at thetngpodcast.com to be the first to know when we do our live shows or host events exclusively for our members. We'll see you next time.